E aí pessoal, tudo na paz? Aqui quem fala é o Zansky.
E eu, Rex.
Que tosse ruim, mano. Que foi? Eu tô cagado.
Tua voz mudou,
Sim, tu esqueceu que o nosso criador falou que ia mudar minha voz?
mas através da tosse.
É, vai entender, né? Agora, vamos trabalhar?
Vamos começar com essa propaganda da afiliada da Globo no Pará, TV Liberal para o Apebas.
Primeiro, em saudade dessas TVs de tubo sempre tomo Shiba. Segundo, em saudade Bob Esponja na TV Globo. Terceiro e não menos importante, em como é que veio o som da TV antes da mulher ligar?
Ah, meu Deus do céu, eu não acredito numa coisa dessa.
É realmente, o som da TV vir antes de alguém ligar é algo inacreditável. Para 2004, isso é de outro mundo.
Ô Zé, homem, vem ajeitar essa TV aqui, por favor.
De novo essa televisão, pelo amor de Deus.
Atuação, ó, um barato, digna de receber um Oscar. Peraí, do nada Caldeirão do Hulk? Primeiro tava no Bob Esponja, agora Caldeirão do Hulk?
É, vai ver, começaram a gravar num sábado de manhã e por algum motivo só voltaram a gravar à tarde.
Clássico. O famoso bombril na antena que não
pessoal, tudo na paz?
Fala, mundo, tudo certo? Eu sou Randall Bergamasco, esse é o canal Mundano, tô brincando.
Pois é, dando uma de Randall Bergamasco, o Agora Pronto volta com um tópico que eu sempre quis trazer, bandeiras.
Só que a gente vai mostrar o melhor do pior do design da vestilografia.
Eu puxei essas bandeiras através de um tópico do Reddit e também por pesquisas por conta própria, né? Começando daquele jeito, Bom Progresso, Rio Grande do Sul.
Tá de sacanagem, né, mano? Você tá de sacanagem que a bandeira é essa. É feita no pente, preguiçosa desse jeito. Vai se lascar, moço.
Essa é a melhor imagem da bandeira que eu encontrei sem marca d'água, e eu não encontrei nenhuma informação sobre ela, o significado das formas, das cores, nada. A maior parte dessas que eu peguei é assim, sem descrição, até a prefeitura não dá descrição da bandeira. E essas imagens também eu acabo tirando da Wikipédia, e mesmo assim ainda consegue ter uma imagem ruim, viu?
Se já começou assim, eu tô com medo do que vai vir depois.
Bituruna, Paraná.
Nossa, que qualidade terrível é essa? Roxo numa bandeira. Por que essa cor não combina, hein? Eu queria saber. Atenção, vestilógrafos que assistem esse vídeo. Por que roxo não dá certo em bandeira? Ou até combina, só que tá super saturado aqui. E esse quadrado branco aqui, desalinhado, com sei lá o que tem no brasão, mas tá feio do mesmo jeito.
No brasão tem fotos reais de algumas plantas. Trigo, uma araucária e, ao que tudo indica, uma oca de um índio.
Não, mano, a pior coisa que tem que fazer na bandeira é por texto ou foto. Bandeira é design e formas, e não colagem de creche do infantil.
Pérola do Oeste, Paraná.
O texto todo torto em Arial ainda, e ainda tem essas plantas enormes de grande.
Eu também não encontrei nenhuma informação sobre essa bandeira, mas presumo eu que essas plantas e flores são predominantes na cidade ou na agricultura.
Minha opinião, esses detalhes como planta, símbolo, tinham que ser pequenos. Esse daí eu acho que foi preguiça, tipo, faz qualquer coisa aí.
Saindo do sul, vamos pro sudeste com a bandeira de Bom Jardim do Rio de Janeiro.
Por que tem 2 cisnes e um N amarelo no meio?
Segundo um blogueiro da cidade, porque no site da prefeitura não tem isso, os cisnes são uma alusão ao poema Cisnes, de Júlio Sallusti, um poeta local. O N era em homenagem ao Napoleão Bonaparte, cujo avô do poeta, que era francês e servente dele.
Mas o que tem a ver uma cidade do interior do Rio de Janeiro com Napoleão?
Absolutamente nada.
Absolutamente nada.
Bom, de nada o cisne entende bastante, entendeu? Cisne nada.
Cachoeira Dourada, Minas Gerais.
Eu me pergunto pra que botar texto numa bandeira, entendeu? Tipo, fica feio esteticamente. O sol tem um texto dentro dele e o lema no mar, na onda, sei lá, não faz sentido, acho brega e não agrega nada. As cores também são bem mortas, eu não sei se é a qualidade da foto.
Essa é a bandeira de Badibadacite, São Paulo.
What? É o Blue Sky, mano, é uma borboleta, é nome de grande aqui.
Eu não encontrei informações oficiais, mas, segundo a Wikipédia, essas estrelas eram a representação de 2 fazendas que tinham na região lá, que era de São José do Rio Preto, e entre essas fazendas tinha um córrego chamado Borboleta, porque lá tinha muitas borboletas, tanto que Borboleta foi o primeiro nome dado ao povoado, que depois viraria um distrito de Rio Preto e finalmente emancipado. O nome atual da cidade é Badibadacite, que apesar de parecer um nome de influência ou de uma cantora, era de um ex-deputado estadual de Rio Preto.
Olha, eu entendo você fazer uma homenagem, botando algum elemento que arremeta a história da cidade, mas pra que botar uma borboleta tão grande, principalmente que a cidade nem se chama mais Borboleta?
Pois é, essa alteração incomoda até hoje alguns moradores de lá.
Também, meu amigo, não é pra tanto, qualquer cidadão faria o mesmo. Nossa floresta quebra-pedra, é o nome de uma planta que tem aqui. A nossa bandeira não tem uma quebra-pedra enorme de grande, e qualquer um ficaria pé da vida se trocasse um nome por um político qualquer.
A nossa bandeira parece da Jamaica, só que colorida. Pelo que eu aprendi na escola, o X branco é a paz entre os seres vivos que passam aqui. As cores em cada canto eu não sei se são espécies de animais ou elementos da natureza, tipo sol, mar, dia, noite, árvores ou sangue vermelho. Agora a bandeira de Catiguá, São Paulo.
Isso é a bandeira ou é a colagem do pré-escolar, mano? De novo, precisa mesmo dessas flores de que parte do PowerPoint? Bastava só deixar a bandeira do jeito que tava. Só o brasão e o fundo azul. Ia ficar genérico, mas ia ficar menos feio.
Bofete, São Paulo.
Bofete, eu juro que li o nome da cidade errado e pensei besteira. A prefere é quem? Dona Florinda? Pra dar umas boas bofetadas?
Sim, pois não? parte de quem?
Eu tô achando mais engraçado o nome da cidade do que a bandeira feita no pente. O que que é isso? É uma montanha, um monte, uma assinatura? E ainda texto de letra cursiva. É brega, viu? Isso tem uma coisa pra definir. Em fonte de letra cursiva em bandeira é brega, viu? Essas tonalidades de cor não combinam uma com a outra.
Alfredo Chaves, Espírito Santo.
4 palavras. Que bosta é essa?
Segundo o site da prefeitura, essa estrela no meio representa a sede do município, não é à toa que está escrito aí. As 6 estrelas são os distritos. Estes elementos, um ligado ao outro, são as principais atividades econômicas da cidade, que no caso é um cacho de banana, que parece mais uma pena, e o leite e o café.
Maluco, esse é o cacho de banana mais feio que já vi. Aliás, essa é uma das bandeiras mais feias que eu já vi na minha vida, viu? Isso aqui parece tudo menos bandeira de cidade. Não dá nem pra ler os nomes dos distritos. Pra que botar essa fonte de letra cursiva? Pra que virar de cabeça pra baixo? Pra que pôr leite e uma linha que liga os dois elementos na bandeira?
Indo para o centro-oeste, com a bandeira de Marcelândia, Mato Grosso.
Desenvolvimento e progresso é o nosso existir. Bom, primeiro que eu dou um ponto positivo em não usar um Arial ou uma letra cursiva, mas eu também não boto mão na cabeça não. Lema grande assim, eu acho que não devia estar na bandeira, ainda mais desse tamanho. A nossa bandeira, ordem e progresso, são 2 palavras simplificadas. Ordem e progresso. Não precisa botar um 3, por isso que ficou... Os caras fizeram um meme lá do amor, ordem e progresso. Poxa, Hans Donner, eu tive respeito, mas você deu uma baita de uma bola fora. E ainda mais, voltando à bandeira, seria mais prudente tu pegar aquela imagem que tá ali no canto, botar no meio e tirar os textos. Pronto, melhora a bandeira em uns 80%. O lema podia ser representado pelas cores da bandeira, que é azul e branco.
Figueirão, Mato Grosso do Sul.
Honestamente, eu não achei essa bandeira feia não. Mas esse texto longo e as cores muito saturadas pecou demais. Eu não sei pra que botar esse adjetivo sustentável no lema. Bota só cidadania em desenvolvimento e pronto. Ou tira o texto e deixe que as cores da bandeira representem as qualidades da cidade.
Essa aqui já é conhecida, virou meme entre a comunidade vestilógrafa, mas ainda assim acho que vale a pena mostrar. Chapadão do Céu, Goiás.
Chapadão, chapadão. Olha, de novo, eu dou um ponto positivo por tentar se diferenciar das outras. Mas isso aqui foi um completo desperdício. Ficou parecendo um logotipo de uma empresa de laticínios, de ovos, ou um programa rural de TV do que uma bandeira de uma cidade. Quem teve essa ideia tava chapadão.
A última do Centro-Oeste, Morro Agudo de Goiás.
Hã? Isso pra mim parece um cheat post de bad trip ou uma bandeira de escola, de samba, do que uma bandeira de cidade. Nem precisava de tanto elemento assim. E a ordem dos arco-íris ainda tá errada. Tem uns 2, 3, 9 estrelas no canto e uma na frente da pomba. Eu não entendi.
Da região norte, Bagre do Pará.
Ordem e bagre trabalho? Quem fez isso é um cabeça de bagre, né? Pra deixar o lema mal posicionado dessa forma, e depois nos quer e leia ordem e bagre trabalho.
Essa também tem um texto mal posicionado. Careiro da Várzea, Amazonas.
Tá de sacanagem, né, mano? Putz grila. Quando a pessoa bate o olho, já pensa besteira. Eu juro que li um cara ali, a palavra trabalho, atravessando o nome da cidade. Não é possível que alguém em sã consciência viu, revisou isso e achou, tá ótima, vamos içar lá na frente da prefeitura.
Manuel Urbano, Acre. Atenção, a cidade se chama Manuel com O, não com U.
Mano, não, os caras estão indo longe demais. Como é que os caras erram o nome da própria cidade? cidade. Velho, isso aqui não tem nem desculpa. É a bandeira da cidade. É um símbolo importante. A prefeitura, isso aí. O que custa eles mudarem uma letra desse brasão? A faixa azul lá embaixo tá dividida, não tem nenhuma curva ou elemento em cima que justifique ela tá dividida. E pra que esse do, bem aí, separado do ano de fundação da cidade? Ou melhor, quem que usa as preposições dessa forma? Ninguém fala ano do 1976, é de, não do. Macho, tu só tinha um trabalho. E até nisso fazem questão de errar.
Carmolândia, Tocantins.
Minha nossa, os meus olhos chega doem de tanta poluição visual que tem nela, as cores super saturadas, excesso de elementos pixelados e mal cortados no Photoshop, no Paint. Rapaz, se tu tirar boa parte dos elementos, ela ainda fica feia.
A última do norte, Caroebe, Roraima, com a marca d'água do site que eu tirei porque eu não encontrei outra com qualidade melhor.
Cara, povo do norte se esforça pra fazer bandeira ruim, viu? O que era pra ser esse negócio cinza eu não sei, mas ele é feio. E deixa o texto, além de desalinhado, invertido. 4 de 4991 Ed Ob Mevon. Que bosta.
E agora chegamos ao nosso querido, amado e idolatrado Nordeste.
Querido, amado e idolatrado, caramba, a gente é o que mais sofre preconceito lá no sul, sendo que a gente que carrega esse país nas costas junto com a Amazônia.
Cocal de Telha, Piauí.
As estrelas toda torta, com tudo pixelizado feito no pente, fora que eu não consegui entender, eles tentaram misturar duas bandeiras em uma? Ó aqui, a linha saindo da bandeira. Ai, ai, até eu, no pente, consigo fazer melhor.
Isso sim que é pente. Bom Jardim, Pernambuco.
Credo, só tem pente no computador dessas prefeituras? Não tem Photoshop ou no contrato uma, sei lá, uma terceirizada pra fazer o serviço? Por que tem estrela amarela em vez de folhas nessa árvore? Foi uma criança que fez isso ou o quê? No Gartic. Eu acho que até uma criança faz melhor. Isso aqui é feito de qualquer jeito.
Macarane, Bahia.
Oxe, um índio com 3 cabelos, ou sei lá o que é isso lá em cima, parece um Playmobil.
A região era habitada por índios caranis que dão nome à cidade. Eu não encontrei nenhuma informação oficial sobre esses 3 capacetes ou cabelos, mas presumo eu que, tirando da Wikipédia, seriam 3 homens importantes da cidade, e é que eu preciso ver a cola: Jovimiano Neres, Antônio Caires Pinheiro de Carvalho e Damásio Ferreira.
Assim, o índio tudo bem, se ficasse só nisso eu relevo, mas 3 cabelos de Playmobil pra representar 3 homens, ficava muito esquisito. Assim, a bandeira eu não achei feia, mas estranha é.
América Dourada, Bahia.
O quadrado vermelho desalinhado, dois quadrados vermelhos aqui que tem duas tonalidades diferentes e um que parte de uma cenoura.
O site da prefeitura diz que os símbolos cívicos representam a evolução política, administrativa e econômica da cidade. E eu acho que arremata com o significado dessas 3 flechas, porque eu não encontrei nenhuma informação precisa delas. Nem da cenoura ou da planta, mas provavelmente é a principal fonte de agricultura de lá.
Se eles tivessem simplificado, alinhado, centralizado, ficaria muito melhor do que isso daí. Pra mim, acho que é elemento demais mata a bandeira.
Antônio Gonçalves, Bahia.
Pra que misturar 2 letras numa só? A planta feita no pente, desalinhada e descentralizada, pixelizada. A paleta de cor é escura demais e não combina a cor uma com a outra. Tem um rastro branco vazando aqui ao lado do retângulo verde, dá pra ver.
São Miguel das Matas, Bahia.
Que bo... Eita, que bosta é essa, mano? Isso era pra ser um anjo? Tá mais pra um desarranjo. Drogado, chapadão do céu. Eu nem sei o que eles estavam tentando fazer com essa posição desproporcionada. Se era pra ser o padroeiro da cidade, vocês deveriam fazer uma homenagem mais bem feita, não essa coisa aí distorcida, desfigurada, vinda de Chernobyl.
Finalmente chegamos ao Ceará, com São Gonçalo do Amarante.
Parece a bandeira do Mato Grosso do Sul. Cara, se não fosse o excesso de estrelas, tortas inclusive, bem tortas, a bandeira ficaria 1000 vezes melhor.
São 7 estrelas, cada uma é um distrito diferente. Eu peguei essa daí por causa disso, e também porque tava faltando bandeira cearense pro vídeo.
É dose, viu? Esses tinham tudo pra dar certo, mas as estrelas tortas e uma mais distante que a outra, broxou demais.
Pedra Branca, Ceará.
Isso parece mais um logotipo de igreja evangélica de beira de estrada ou de uma escola cristã do que uma bandeira de cidade. Unidos sempre. Deu pra ver, misturando o P com B. É Unidos da PQP.
A última do Nordeste, e eu considero como a pior mesmo de todas, é Feira Grande, Alagoas.
Credo, mano, que coisa mais feia, mano. O que é isso? É uma tripa, uma folha? É um rio poluído? Isso no meio do mapa, isso aí no meio é o mapa da cidade? É uma colagem feita no Paint. Isso não é bandeira de cidade. É uma colagem, sei lá, feita no MS Paint.
Eu também não encontrei nenhum significado de cada elemento, nem das cores, nem das plantas, muito menos dessa forma do meio que não é o mapa da cidade.
Eu acho que nem eles sabiam direito o que tava tentando fazer e desenham qualquer coisa que veio à cabeça e pronto, saiu essa vergonha, mano. Se eu fosse o prefeito dessa cidade, eu teria vergonha de içar uma coisa dessa. Não, se não tem design bom aqui nessa cidade, eu vou contratar uma terceirizada pra içar uma bandeira pelo menos bem feita, pô.
E antes de finalizar, cabe uma menção desonrosa à proposta da nova bandeira para Belo Horizonte feita em 2022, que é essa daqui. Segundo o designer, foi uma tentativa de simplificar o desenho do nascer do sol na Serra do Curral, que aparece no brasão oficial da bandeira da cidade. A bandeira foi rejeitada em 84%. A maioria que rejeitou falam que os políticos estão sem mais o que fazer, eu acho que é um argumento bem vago e ignorante, enquanto que a minoria que reprovou fala que não gostou por causa da simplicidade extrema dos símbolos da cidade. Enfim, galera, se vocês gostaram do vídeo,
Deixa o like, se inscreve e ativa o sininho.
obrigado pela atenção e falou!
Falou!
Tá.
probably Darbian's as well. The video in the shortcut matches up with the same run that was used for 1-2, but the sound of the controller clicks are pretty bad in Darbian's run during this shortcut, and I think Butterboon thought it was a bit too much, so they tried to fix it by keeping the audio from the TAS run during that section. The audio from the coins that are collected in the room do not match up with what is happening on screen, and the audio matches perfectly with the TAS. Honestly, the shortcut in the TAS doesn't even look inhuman, so I'm not sure why they would have changed it. If anything, it just seems like they're going to as much effort as possible to try and disguise the fact that they are ripping off other people's videos. Oh, and I haven't even mentioned the fact that Tavo is making a complete mockery out of the entire thing by sipping coke and eating pizza between levels. I'm not entirely sure what the motive behind this creative choice was, because one might think they are trying to make it obvious this entire video is a joke, but I'm not too sure about that. Given all of the effort they are going to make this footage seem original, and hide the fact that they stole it, it makes it seem as though they are playing this one straight. The original runs weren't credited, there was no mention that this was a parody or fake or anything, and as you'll see later, he really tries to sell it as real. So I can only take the coke drinking and pizza eating as him trying to be unironically cool by playing at such a top level while eating and drinking. In my opinion, it just comes off as really douchey though. Back to the run, in 4-1 he goes back to the original TAS with all of the same issues, including the TAS-only fast acceleration and the flagpole glitch with no setup. To illustrate Tavo's cluelessness, before 4-2 begins, he reaches for a slice of pizza, but doesn't even know if he has time or not. The indecisiveness results in his hand being off the controller when Mario starts moving. In 4-2 he steals footage from a different speedrunner. This time it's Cosmic, another one of the all-time greatest Super Mario players. The run that was taken was Cosmic's 456.994, set on the 30th of May 2017. Again, we can hear the audio clicks from Cosmic's controller as the video was ripped from the live stream. At a couple of moments, there are some pretty bizarre things happening in the display. A coin here, a brick there. This is because the TAS hits a coin block here, and a brick here. The TAS finishes 4-2 way quicker because it uses a much more complicated strategy in order to change Mario's position, which allows the wrong warp to be performed. You can see how far it is ahead because of how quickly the display disappears compared to the level textures. When Mario appears in the warp zone, we transition back to the original TAS, and the loading time between 4-2 and the warp zone is way quicker than it should be. 8-1 through to 8-3 is just the TAS run with no other runs mixed in. The funny thing about 8-2 is that Mario is facing backwards for the entire time. In order to do this, Mario has to perform a frame-perfect jump every single time he lands. It's kind of baffling why they would go to the trouble of splicing in realistic runs for other levels, but keep in 8-2 from the TAS when it's so obviously unrealistic. It also includes a crazy wall jump right before the end. He finishes 8-3 with 244 left on the clock, something that's impossible to do without the TAS-only fast acceleration at the beginning of the level. Going into Bowser's Castle, his heart rate is still chilling at a cool 85. By comparison, when Darbian reached this stage of the run, his heart rate had climbed to 130. The first 3 rooms of Bowser's Castle are just Darbian's run again. All of the previous issues appear due to the cropped display. It appears and disappears at the wrong times, and you can even see the tops of flying fish appear. When it gets to the underwater portion, it transitions back to the TAS. This is also pretty funny because Mario's sprite is all messed up. This happens when the TAS-only fast acceleration is used underwater. Mario is stuck in a state of facing both left and right, and we are able to maintain that state for the entire duration of the swim because you don't actually need to keep holding right in order to keep your momentum underwater. Andrew G hilariously demonstrated this by juggling while swimming during an AGDQ run. Heading into Bowser, the TAS faces backwards until hitting the bridge switch, maintaining frame-perfect jumps in order to do so. His heart rate skyrockets to a blazing 95 beats per minute. Afterwards, when Mario gets to the princess, there is another splice in the footage. I'm guessing this was because they needed to extend the end screen so that Tavo could milk his reaction as much as possible. Speaking of which, Tavo gives one of the greatest performances I've ever seen. Again, I'm confused. Is this supposed to be a casual run or a terrific achievement? Why play the entire thing cool by eating pizza, only to then act like you've done something amazing? The entire presentation is just so incongruent. What's possibly the weirdest thing of all though is the fact that the timer ends up being 5 minutes and 12 seconds, even though the actual time of the run was 4 minutes and 54 seconds, as that was the final time for the TAS. I am clueless as to why the timer doesn't match up with reality. One reason could be that it's obviously just a self-made timer and sucks at being accurate. That is probably the case. The other reason is that they knew the actual time of the TAS run they were basing the display off was faster than the world record, and they thought that beating the record by 2 seconds would make the fact that the run was fake a bit too obvious. But that begs the question, if the final timer was so slow, why did they use such fast runs? They could have just stolen any hundreds of runs that were faster than 5 minutes and 12 seconds and just used an accurate timer. This would have been actually believable. Another weird thing about the video is that he doesn't even start or stop a timer. He clearly hasn't watched any speedruns and has no idea how the speedrunners actually use their timers. The entire video is so strange and weird, and his cluelessness just makes it more bizarre. The saddest part about all of this is that if the channel actually did a video celebrating and explaining the real speedrunners and their achievements, they probably could have gotten similar or even more views. A few months later, the speedrunner Bismuth made a YouTube video explaining the world record, and his video received double the amount of views. He didn't even have the millions of subscribers Badabun had either. Instead, he chose to steal footage from legitimate runners that actually put the work in and tried to claim them as his own. There was no credit given whatsoever. It was just a shallow, pathetic attempt at creating a viral video. Original content, my ass. Believe it or not, the real speedrunners still get comments on their videos suggesting that they stole footage from Badabun. It's insane. Even in the event the creators of this video thought everyone would take it as a joke, they still should have given credit where it's due. I really do think this was an honest attempt at trying to fool people in order to get views. Now I want to give a huge shout out to Cosmic for helping out with this video. I found out about this video because Cosmic made a tweet about it after getting yet another comment suggesting that he stole his run from Badabun. If you want to watch legitimate Super Mario gameplay, you should definitely follow Cosmic on Twitch and subscribe to his YouTube channel. I will put a link to both Cosmic's and Darbian's channels in the description. Please go and support real speedrunners. Thank you so much for watching, you legends. I hope you are having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next video.
You know what the top Google search result for Geometry Dash is? Maybe it's the game's Steam page? Wow, this video turned out great! An exposal of a fake Geometry Dash website and how it's stealing popular Scratch projects. It's a good thing I never have to think about this ever again. It all makes sense!
Craig, is that you? No one's heard from you in weeks, ever since you started rambling about that fake Geometry Dash.
What do you know about fake Geometry Dash? Do you have any idea what I've been through? One games, Geometry Light, Egg Dash.
What are you talking about? You're not making any sense.
Oh, trust me, I am! There is so much to uncover. Come here, I'll tell you everything. And I mean everything. So, a while back I made a video where I investigated those fake Geometry Dash websites you might have seen. Long story short, they take advantage of the fact that Geometry Dash is a game you have to install through the App Store or Steam or whatever. However, there's a surprisingly large demographic, mostly children, that think that you can just search the game up on Google and immediately start playing, no download required. Alternatively, maybe they just have a device like a Chromebook where they can't install Geometry Dash. So what these sites do is simple. They call themselves Geometry Dash, work their way up Google search, and then when someone clicks on it, they have a Geometry Dash to play, usually with a ton of ads where all the money goes to the website and none goes to RobTop, the developer of the game. In other words, it's a scam and you shouldn't fall for it. Now, obviously, you can't just put actual Geometry Dash on a website. Porting this game to a web browser would probably require remaking it from the ground up. Fortunately, some people have actually done this. The majority of these websites would present you with Geometry Dash v1.5, a remake of the game made in the building block programming language Scratch by the legend himself, Griffpatch. But although it's impressive for Scratch standards, you can't really pass this off as the real thing. But to the people foolish enough to think that they're playing real Geometry Dash on a website, this was enough. Scratch Geometry Dash actually came with a level editor, so it would go on to develop a bit of a community. People would remix it and build their own levels, and others would go on to add new objects and mechanics. One Scratcher in particular, iPhone AT&T Time Warner Cable 115, made it their mission to remake as many real GD levels in Scratch as possible, from level easy to change of scene to everything in between them. No lie, there's literally thousands. Are they good? Not really, in fact most are barely even playable, but I see it as more of an art form. It's super respectable in my eyes, and it's done as a passion project. But the fake Geometry Dash websites quickly took notice, and this was a goldmine to them. Now they could clickbait hundreds of real GD levels, serve up the Scratch versions, which they stole, and profit from all the ads around it. They also have these really funny AI-generated descriptions, like, in Geometry Dash I Spy with my little eye, you will overcome countless challenging challenges. Fly like a lightning-fast rocket past the spikes and obstacles ahead. Of course, they also sprinkle in some other random games or weird GD clones, but that's to be expected. The most notable of these websites is geometrydash.io, which has hundreds, maybe even thousands of these stolen Scratch projects. But really, there's tons of these websites. The more you look, the more you'll find. And it's not just Geometry Dash. You'll also find these for FNAF, Happy Wheels, Wordle, Slope, Backrooms, and so on. And even though these websites sometimes give you what you want, they are there specifically to trick you. They all run on the same code, so to spot one, just look for a footer that looks like this, or a comment section kinda like this. So that's where my last video ended, but lots has happened since then. For example, if you search Geometry Dash on Google, it says that some results have been removed due to a copyright complaint from the one and only RobTop Games. Turns out, he's been sending multiple of these and they actually work. The search results are improving and some bad websites don't even appear anymore. But it's pretty obvious that if you strike down one of these websites, two more will grow back. And for some reason, geometrydash.io never dies. Probably because they keep changing their homepage to a different link. Speaking of that website, did you know that there's actually a kids.geometrydash.io? I could not tell you why this exists, but it seems to have less ads, so maybe it's a legal thing. Also, a few days after I posted my video, gd.io added a disclaimer to their website, a non-official fan-made version of Geometry Dash. Then this September, they added, "We are not the official game," in capital letters. They also credited the creator of the Scratch project. But if you go to the website now, you'll notice two things. Firstly, that disclaimer has been banished to a link all the way at the bottom of the page. And secondly, they're not running the Scratch version anymore. You see, as impressive as it is, Scratch Geometry Dash obviously doesn't play that well, and it's just a stolen project made by someone else. What these websites needed was a game that actually looked and played exactly like real Geometry Dash. a recreation of the game so impressive that you could barely tell it apart from the real thing, and above all else, a game that they could have full control over the development of. This video isn't about the existence of these fake Geometry Dash websites or the scratch games that they steal, nor is it about all those other weird ripoffs that they also host. This video is about one single Geometry Dash clone that I've spent months of my life investigating, a game with the ambitious goal of becoming a perfect copy of Geometry Dash. A game that would undergo dozens of strange updates and break out into multiple spin-off games. A game that would build their own RobTop levels, and a game that would steal levels that never existed to begin with. But most importantly, a game that would absolutely break me as a human being. This is the story of Geometry Light. So, as much as I would love to jump right into the lore of this game, there's a few other GD copies I need to quickly highlight for context. And the first one actually shows up in my last fake GD video at 6 minutes and 25 seconds. There's Geometry Dash Unblocked, which is your more traditional Geometry Dash copy and not something made on Scratch. The levels are actually recreations of the Geometry Dash ones, like Associations is actually Clubstep with the monsters and everything. This is GeoJump, a pretty terrible copy of Geometry Dash that's been around for years. Despite the weird level names like Preamble, Let's Go, Gravitational, they're just really sad recreations of the main GD levels. However, Stereo Madness was replaced with some weird knockoff version fresh out of the recent tab. The game goes all the way up to Electrodynamics, or Planet Hunt, but as you can see, it looks and plays terribly. But what I want you to focus on is the music. It turns out that this game exclusively uses old tracks by F777, who you might know is the creator of Deadlocked, Sonic Blaster, and many other bangers. I asked him if he knew about this, and sure enough, they just grabbed these songs without permission. Funny enough, this game actually has a second version. It has a proper menu and uses the actual Geometry Dash songs, but they obviously don't sync. There's also a bunch of funky icons to pick from, as well as a shuffle button, which I made, by the way, for my Icon Kit website. Then that game got a second version, adding all the levels up to Finger Dash. And this time they don't have weird names, but that doesn't stop them from being awful. Then they made GeoJump World, which is the 10 GD World levels followed by the challenge as an 11th. Once again, not good. I would even argue that the Scratch games play better than this. I thought it ended there, but then someone on Twitter sent me Slope Ball, a game about a heroic ball exploring several mysterious islands. It's just the exact same game rotated 10 degrees! Aside from making you a ball, they also cleaned up the menu and improved the physics a bit, but there's still nothing going for this game. The other game I need to quickly cover is what I call GD Unity, because it's a really faithful recreation of Geometry Dash made in the Unity game engine. I went over this game in GD Copy 7, so I'll keep it brief. Although this game looks really impressive, it has its flaws. They tried to recreate all the menus, but the buttons do nothing and there's typos everywhere. My favorites are Progress Bar and Quiche Checkpoint Mode. You can choose any icon from Geometry Dash, but death effects don't work and you're always forced to use the fire trail. The achievements menu is weird, and as it turns out, all the textures there come from me, from the old achievement page on my website GD browser. Finally, and most importantly, the music doesn't sync and the physics suck. The ship gravity is brutal, the cube can bonk its head, the UFO is... what? And it gets significantly worse. Much like GeoJump, this game goes up to Electrodynamics, but all signs point to it being a completely different project by a different developer entirely. I actually got a hold of the developer at one point, but he didn't provide much useful information, and now he's completely ghosting me. You can't deny that this game lays a pretty good foundation, so it ended up branching out into a lot of spin-offs, like Meltdown, which turned out decent, but obviously has its flaws. Sub-Zero only has press start, and it's actually some weird extended version of the level. The ending is weirdly difficult. And it uses Geometrical Dominator! You had one job! There's also a Bloodbath spin-off for some reason, but this transition is impossible because every portal resets you to normal gravity. But I data mined the game, and yes, it is the entire level. It's faithful, but there's definitely some mistakes, like using the X object here, leaving out some creator logos, and filling in all the blank spaces with this object for some reason. Geometry Dash Scratch is probably the weirdest of the bunch, because it's the exact same as Meltdown, but they just changed the logo. I really could not explain the logic behind this one. Finally, they did Geometry Dash Breeze, which is actually a fan game by the creator Drexel. He makes really good RobTop styled levels, and you can play them all from his account. My favorite is Into the Zone, it plays so nicely. But yeah, for some reason they made the first 3 levels of Breeze. I don't know if that's an honor or kind of concerning. Once again, it's not great, and the spider is pretty silly. This game will show up again later, but for now, we can finally head back to geometrydash.io, which is where this story really begins. And let me just explain how this video is gonna work. First, we're gonna go over the history of this website, everything they've done since my last video, as well as all the details of that Geometry Light game I keep hinting about. Then, we'll get into how the website starts to take a weird turn, and finally, I'm gonna completely tear it apart with data mining, clue gathering, and everything in between. This is something I've been investigating like a maniac for months, so strap in. Starting off, shortly after my last fake GD video, I realized that I should probably keep a closer eye on this website. So I set up a bot that posts to Twitter every time they add a new Scratch game to their lineup. When that video came out in November of 2022, it seems like they were in the middle of a 9 circles phase, adding levels like Downbase, Crimson Clutter, Astronaut 13, just to name a few. In December, they claimed to add Sub-Zero, but it was just this random game. Then they changed it to the Scratch one a few days later. Following that, they would go on to add Scratch versions of Dryout all the way up to Finger Dash, even linking these games right from their homepage. Then they began working their way up the Gauntlet levels, with this masterpiece making its way onto the site on March 16th, 2023. June 30, we saw I Spy, July 18th we got Limbo, and then Change of Scene on the 21st. On August 5th, there was a lot of Skibbity Toilet, and Among Dash. September added Mario Dash, which was, this. We also got Egg Dash and Spooky Dash, which are popular Scratch projects by Chipmunk with completely original levels and a new engine that runs much better than the other Scratch Geometry Dash. The site also started moving all their Scratch games to Turbo Warp, which is just a faster Scratch. In January of this year, they added Mario 64. It's literally just Mario 64, I'm not even joking. I have no idea how they got away with this. Someone on Twitter even beat it. They also added Lobotomy Dash, which is...
Fire in the hole!
Gotta love the default Unity physics. Turns out this one's hosted on lobotomydash.com, which is yet another fake Geometry Dash website where this is the front page game. It has a corner where you can watch Lobotomy Dash videos, and a long AI-generated description stating that a lobotomy is the process of curing mental illness by causing brain damage. It sounds absurd, but its effectiveness will surprise you. Finally, this April they added Dash Spider. The funniest part about this one is that they literally forgot to add a game. It's just a blank screen, there's no data. To this day, they're still adding more Scratch games and the occasional other slop you'd come to expect. Oh, and how could I forget? Back on the 8th of August, just before the 10-year anniversary of Geometry Dash, there was this random other game they added with the name Geometry Dash Lite. Normally, this isn't a very big deal, but this time, Scratch Geometry Dash vanished from the homepage of the site, and this game took its place. Right away, let's clear up that this is not the Unity version of Geometry Dash I showed earlier. It is made in Unity, but to keep things simple, we'll call this one Geometry Dash Unity, and this one Geometry Light, which is also the display name for Real GD Lite on Apple devices. Just from looking at the menu, it's clear that this game is in a pretty unfinished state. Most of the menu options are labeled as coming soon, including Newgrounds, the only settings are for volume, and you can't choose a custom icon, despite the fact that they're literally flying by on the menu. The info box in the corner states that this is version 1.0, and the developer is geometrylight.io, which the More Games button also takes you to. It's yet another one of those fake GD sites, but back when this was released, this was the only game available on it. Once you press play, following a painfully slow transition, you're met with every level up until Jumper. Give one of them a try, and... yeah, so this is the most perfect recreation of Geometry Dash that I've ever seen. It looks almost identical to the real thing, and the physics are more accurate than any other clone I've ever played. Even the ship controls surprisingly nicely. My only real nitpick is that, like with most copies, there's zero orb buffering. Also, the levels are literally one-to-one. Every tiny detail is placed correctly, and I have a suspicion that these were somehow ported over directly from the real game, which is definitely possible because I've done it many times. Now, is this game perfect? No, obviously not. The menu transitions take forever, respawning in practice resets your velocity, the pulsing rods sometimes have hearts, dryout is one word, and overall things just still feel kind of off. But whoever made this game still cooked really hard, and I respect them for it. I just wish it wasn't made solely as a cash grab for scam websites. But this is only version 1.0, so what's this game gonna do next? Well, 1 week later, they released version 0.38. Yes, it went backwards. As far as I can tell, the only difference in this version is that Jumper is now rated D-Min, but everything else is the same. Over the next few months, they continued to update the game, even leaving a changelog on geometry-io. Safe to say, this was their game, which unlike Scratch, they had full control over. The most notable additions were Time Machine through X-Step being added, and them dropping 2.2 months before RobTop did. I'm not really sure what fixed practice mode color change means, but by this version, the checkpoints were now blue instead of green. Not to mention, the progress bar setting was now Progress Bar, and auto checkpoints capitalized the letter P. As far as the main menu went, everything was still coming soon. But aside from that, they were still making steady progress. Jumper's difficulty was corrected, Dryout got its space back, the menu fading was cut entirely, the heart rods were gone, sadly, the icon and ship were changed to this, the ball controlled fine, but definitely felt more weird than the others, and the new levels were correct. On the flip side, orb buffering was still absent, and they didn't even try with the mirror portal. So at this point you might be thinking, is this really that impressive? These are pretty easy levels to remake. You can literally fit every object and trigger in this single screenshot. This is just Geometry Dash 1.3, but there's coins, and you can't even pick an icon. And yeah, that's a pretty good point. It's cool, but not mind-blowing. What are they gonna do next? Add Clutterfunk? Oh. Well, I guess it's not that hard to make. Oh! Yeah, so just a few days later, they dropped World and Sub-Zero on the exact same day, November 27th, 2023. To no one's surprise, Geometry World just copies the exact same menu and engine as Geometry Light, and disappointingly, it's only the first 3 levels of the game. You know, the ones that don't have any move triggers. But they did get color channels working, as well as the animated objects, so props to them. 1 month later, just after Christmas, they would go on to add level 4, Years. And yeah, they got stuff moving. It was bound to happen eventually. Geometry Sub-Zero, on the other hand, was a lot more interesting, because when this game came out, there was no menu, pausing, or even practice mode. It just thrusts you right into press start, and there's no way to leave. You're also now rocking the default icon set, except for the ball, which is this for some reason. And we get our first look at the robot. Spoilers, it doesn't control that great. But who am I to talk when they literally made press start? The effects, camera triggers, reversing, and everything in between. Though it is the old version from before the coins were reworked, and unlike Geometry Light, it was definitely made by hand rather than being ripped from the actual game. 1 month later, after the GD World update, they got around to adding a proper menu for the game, but it was very apparent that this was a brand new menu made from the ground up. The buttons are in slightly different places, and the only icons in the background are the default ones, except once again, the ball. Over in the pause menu, they fixed the progress bar typo, and despite what the button says, checkpoints were green again. For some reason, the level was called Press Start Full, even though it's just the normal version. But you can't really argue with 34 million views. Unlike Light and World, there's also a coming soon screen. Oh, and did I mention they added Knock'em? Not really much to say here, it's Knock'em. This level gives us our first look at the wave, and it does not control well. Which is weird, because how do you mess up the wave? We also get to try out the spider, which works, but looks kinda stupid. And on the main menu, it jumps for some reason. By the way, you know how Knock'em used to have really terrible coins? Well, somehow they made them even worse. The first coin is missing its little sparkle, so there's even less indication of it. The second coin's key is missing, so you just get it for free. And the last coin just doesn't exist. Finally, another month later, in late January, they added Power Trip. Once again, it's exactly what you'd expect, but they removed the smiley face in the wave part. And not only is this message not randomized anymore, but it just turns green on its own. Normally you have to click for that. Also, the second message does it too. To nobody's surprise, you get the last coin for free. They actually patched the spider exploit in this level, which technically puts them one step ahead of RobTop, but it's also iconic to the level at this point. Same goes for the robot. Also in January, they finally got around to releasing Meltdown, but they kind of phoned it in seeing that it's just one level, and they never added more. They also forgot the key at the start, but luckily they pushed an emergency update 1 day later that re-adds it, so it would be rude to say that they didn't care. Otherwise, this is just 7Cs with nothing interesting about it. They went back to using the menu and icons from Geometry Light, so I'm not really sure why Sub-Zero didn't. And there you have it, the complete Geometry Light series. They never got around to updating the base game past X-Step, and basic features like the icon kit never happened either. So now that I've more or less set the scene, this is where the story actually begins. Remember how I said that there was another Scratch Geometry Dash game that wasn't a remix of the one by Griff Patch? This one, Spooky Dash by Chipmunk. It came out on October 27th, 2023, and it showed up on geometrydash.io 3 days later in time for Halloween. It's actually a really impressive game. It only has one level, Spooky Scary Skeletons, but it's completely original and the gameplay is great. It feels very RobTop styled, but like 1.0 RobTop styled. Nobody really makes this kind of gameplay anymore, so playing a level like this was a really great experience. On top of that, this game comes with an icon kit, and even a whole level editor which has formed a very passionate community. I'll leave a link to the Scratch project in the description in case you want to try it for yourself. Again, the level is unironically great. And the reason I bring this up is because a little while later, in the middle of December, my bot notified me that they stole the game a second time, but this time under the name Geometry Spooky Dash instead of just Spooky Dash. So then what happened to the first one? Okay, it's a different game, I guess, but what did they change it to? No, they didn't. I refuse to believe it. They made a copy of a Geometry Dash game that never even existed to begin with. Here's a side-by-side comparison, and as you can see, it's basically the same level. This is the only one in the game, and like I said before, it is in fact a really good level. Even the coin placements are really nicely thought out, which is rare to see nowadays. It's also cool to see a 1.0 styled level mixed with some extra decorations like cobwebs and fences. But the reason this is so crazy to me is that this level, Scary Skeletons, or just Spooky in the version they stole, has never existed, in real Geometry Dash at least. It was made by Chipmunk, in Scratch, for Scratch. I searched all over Geometry Dash for this level, but it simply isn't there. Yet, they stole it anyways. These guys have no chill. But it's not just the level they stole. Yes, it's running on the same Geometry Light physics as all the other games, but they redid all of the menus to match the Scratch project, even going as far as to use the same sound effects. They even copied the Choose Your Spook screen, making this the first Geometry Light game where you can choose an icon. And I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear that there's no credit anywhere in this game. It's blatant thievery. Aside from the obvious, I think one of the funniest parts of their Spooky Dash copy is that it came out in December. So if this was supposed to be a Halloween game, they completely missed the bus. But you know what they were just in time for? Yup, they made a Christmas Dash. Just like the last game, it has a Scratch-themed menu and only one level. It's also 1.0 styled with a few festive decorations, and again, it plays pretty nicely. However, unlike last time, the music is just a generic Christmas stock song and there's no sync at all. But hold on, there's no Christmas Dash on Scratch, so who are they stealing from? Yes, it turns out, and I'm not making this up, they just took a bunch of parts from Spooky Dash and rearranged the order they appear in. Don't get me wrong, this is a different level, but it's made with individual parts of Scary Skeletons. And if you think that's weird, then they sprinkle in some Poltergeist followed by the ship part in Back on Track. They put so much effort into making this level unoriginal, it's almost impressive. The final product is this weird, unholy fusion of levels with zero sync. The first coin is given for free, the second one comes from Spooky Dash, and the third one is Back on Track. Nothing about this makes sense, and that's exactly why I was so fascinated by it. But the laziness doesn't end there. Remember all the decorations from Spooky Dash, like these fences? All they did was retexture them a little bit. The floating candles are now various things, the grass is now Christmas trees, and the cobwebs are now snow cobwebs. Yeah, they didn't even try. Also, the icons you can choose are mostly Santa heads, but more importantly, what the f*** is a ZAS? Final verdict, this game is a disaster, and yet I kind of love it for that. Whoever made Geometry Light cares so much about making the game as accurate as possible to real Geometry Dash, but also cares so little about everything else. And that's basically the bootleg game industry in a nutshell. Great, so this brings us up to 6 Geometry Light games, all running the same code and released in the span of about 5 months. People are playing them, the comments from children are rolling in, and things are going great. So what's their next move? Surely it's something predictable and easy that won't make me lose my mind and lead to this video being way longer than it has any reason to... No, please. So yeah, they also made Geometry Dash Breeze. I played it and it was close, but not great. But something felt off. The physics were different. So I quit back to the menu and that's when I realized, wait, this isn't Geometry Light. This is that other Unity remake from before, with the icon kit and the progress bar. So then why the hell is there now a message crediting Geometry Light for this? I thought they were like a competitor or something. So immediately, I came up with two theories. Number one, they're made by the same developer. But this makes no sense because there's nothing reused between them. The only real crossover is this message they added. But even that only appears on this version of the game. The original Breeze website doesn't have it. Not to mention, this version of Breeze was being developed while Geometry Light was. I asked the supposed developer if he made both games, but again, no replies anymore. He's probably onto me. Theory number two, the two of them joined forces. Alongside Breeze, they also launched a credited version of the original game that goes all the way up to Electrodynamics. But again, even though this version with the info box exists, it's not used on all the websites that this game was originally made for. Regardless, maybe the Geometry Light people didn't want to build all these extra levels, so they just bought the game off them. But it's just these two, there's no watermarked version of Meltdown or Bloodbath. Okay, so 8 Geometry Light games, 2 of which are technically not theirs. Now is probably a good time to address the credited website geometrylight.io, because if we head over there, you can see that not only are these games listed there, but they're also the only games listed there. Unlike every fake GD website with random other stuff like Scratch Games and Skibbity Toilet, this one exclusively holds the games that they've been making. Strangely enough, Xmas Dash is credited to Free Games Online, which was just a random other game website, but now it redirects to this one called One Games. Surely this won't show up again later, right? Ugh. Alright, before we continue, let's just take a quick breather. I know this has been a lot of useless information, but hopefully you're doing okay so far. If you need some time to pause and take a break, let it all sink in, now would be a good time to do so. And while you're at it, maybe consider subscribing if you found this interesting so far. I don't upload that often, and when I do, it's usually more crazy stuff like this, so at the very least keep it in the back of your head. At this point, you're fully up to date with the Geometry Light family up until January of 2024. All these games are chilling on geometrydash.io, raking in views, and the main one is still front and center on the website. There's a disclaimer that it's a fan-made game and all that fun stuff. And while I wish it was that simple, this is the part where I reveal that I've been keeping a secret. Because back in early November, like before they made Geometry World or Sub-Zero, my bot notified me of a new game called Geometry Light. And this was really weird because there already was a Geometry Light and it was still on the homepage like usual. So what was this one? Wait, what? It's the exact same thing, just with some kind of texture pack. But the original game was doing fine, it's not like they got copyright struck or anything. It's almost like this was a backup. As you can see, in this version, everything looks stupid. The levels are still unchanged, but many objects like portals, orbs, chains, and pulsing decorations are completely different. And while the default icon is the same, the ship and ball are now kind of goofy. They even tweaked the pause menu and changed the practice mode checkpoints to little ice cream shapes. But perhaps craziest of all, X-Step went from being rated insane to... Yeah, the difficulty faces in this version are crazy. We got Weird Spiral Chick, some sort of alligator, Maurice, Squiggly, and Kill It With Fire. On top of all that, there's still no icon kit for the game despite the real GD icons flying in the background. But there's definitely some problems, like sometimes the ship is invisible, and the layering is totally messed up. So this game sort of just chilled in the depths of geometrydash.io for a couple of months. It was totally overshadowed by actual Geometry Light, and most people didn't even realize it existed at all. But as usual, something was cooking behind the scenes. In early February, they launched Geometry Dash Old Version, a game to blast back to where rhythm-based game nostalgia collides with fresh challenges. Unsure what to expect, I checked it out and... No, please don't do this to me. So remember that really awful GD clone I showed at the start of the video? This menu song is the same one as that game's Bring Me Back Piano version by F777 in the same terribly low quality. Please ignore the fact that this has been my menu loop for months. I told you, this game has been eating away at my sanity. And what about the practice mode song? That would be Triple Fuse by F777, also super low quality, and the track used for the level Circulation in that other game. So what else is going on with this old version of the game? For starters, you might notice that all the disabled buttons were removed from the menu. Now it's just the volume settings, the play button, and a link to geometrylight.io. Heading over to the main levels, you'll see that... Oh. Oh! Yep, they all have different names now, from Poltergeist being gravitational to Can't Let Go being Never Give Up. Most of the level names are close, but they're definitely not what the songs are actually called. And if any of these names sound familiar, that's because most of them are lifted, again, from that other game. In fact, out of the 10 levels available, 6 use the exact same name. This all led me to believe that these two games are in fact connected. In fact, even the icon was the same. It was a pretty strange conclusion to jump to at the time, but trust me, I would end up finding even more evidence. So this begs the question, what's the deal with that older game then? Why are they remaking Geometry Dash for the second time? Well, I believe that one was a prototype, testing out if they could get the basic physics working, and more importantly, if people would actually play the game. And once it took off, that's when they started work on Geometry Light. In the moment, this was like information overload, so I decided to relax and just play the game. Here, let's try Dryout, or Drought. Guys, I don't think this is Dryout. That's right, it turns out that all 10 levels had different names, songs, and most importantly, level design. Some of the levels have similar gameplay, but they're very clearly not the ones that RobTop made. At least partially, because each level only has different gameplay for the first 20% or so. After that, it's back to normal like nothing ever happened. I don't know about you, but I find this fascinating. Not only did they attempt to make their own gameplay, but they tried to mimic the styles of iconic levels that already exist. And if you don't find that interesting, maybe skip ahead, because we're going over every level. Starting off with Stereo Dash, which uses a remix of Stereo Madness by L Midi, formerly Melon. Surprisingly, this game actually credits all the music they used except for F777, but it seems like Stereo Madness got credited to Hexagonist instead, even though that's a totally different remix. I highly doubt they asked for permission to use these songs. Realistically, they probably just searched Newgrounds for good replacements. The level opens right away with a double spike, and it seems to get into some more technical moves much quicker than actual Stereo Madness. But overall, it still flows exactly like the original level, so I don't think it's all that bad. After this weird transition into the ship portal, the level changes back to normal. Let's Go is one of the better edits they did, but I'm probably just saying that because this remix by Supersonicer is absolutely fantastic. Like, dude, this goes so hard. Well done. I think the most notable gameplay changes are this weirder introduction to the yellow pad and the addition of a triple spike here. There's a little branching path shortly after, but neither route has a benefit over the other. Back on Track has never had particularly memorable gameplay, so it's hard to tell what actually changed. But the cutoff is right about here, just before the first coin. Speaking of coins, where did the third one go? Did they add an extra coin to the beginning of the level? They added an extra coin to the beginning of the level, and I think I'm gonna give it a C because it's actually pretty clever, but I think most people would stumble into it by accident. It also should have replaced the first coin and not the third. But that's right, the coin tier list never dies. Moving on to Gravitational, rocking Fendraka's remix of Poltergeist. This one starts with full spikes instead of half, and even has some magenta orb action, which definitely isn't off-putting. Other than that, there really isn't much to say about this level, and it changes back to normal pretty quickly. Drought uses an arrangement of Dryout by Vision, made in Magic Piano of all things. Like you saw before, it opens with a clubstep monster with red orbs for eyes, something that wasn't added until 2.1. This one has some pretty weird gameplay decisions, like this part where you drop down onto the spikes. Out of all the levels they changed, this is actually the least edited one, switching back to the regularly scheduled RobTop gameplay at just 16%. Step After Step opens up looking like a recent tab level, but that's because I keep forgetting it's the actual background color for Base After Base. This remix is by iMoxta, and it's really cool, but doesn't keep sync with the actual song. I'm a little sad to say that the missing spike got overridden with new gameplay, but fortunately the boring first coin did as well. And they replaced it with one that's literally impossible to get. I don't even know how to rank this one. The level goes back to normal at 30% just before the drop, but the edited gameplay before it is very heavily referenced from the original. Never Give Up uses Cool as Pie's remix of Can't Let Go, and this one just feels like something you'd find in a map pack. It's really not that interesting. The gameplay feels robbed of anything that once made it unique, so now it's just a 1.0 level. You have to fall a little earlier to get the coin, and that coin is also the exact cutoff between old and new gameplay. Step Jump's remix is brought to you by Demonic Nobility, and this one hurts me because look at how it begins. What did you do to Jumper? It had one of the most iconic beginnings! Overall, there's just less of those thin pillars that were a staple of the level. This one has a pretty easy coin where you just go up instead of down, and after that the level's back to normal. The coin replaces the one in the first ship, which is a bit of a bummer, and you can even see the small spikes from where it used to be. But I'm gonna give it a D tier instead of an F, just because everything after the coin is RobTop gameplay, so the spike wall you land on is actually repurposed from the original level. Teleporter uses a GarageBand cover of Time Machine by It's Dubstep, but they compressed it just a little bit. So it sounds like this. They also credited this song to Leo BSK, who did make a song called Time Machine, but it's totally different. Anyways, this level actually does a good job keeping the spirit of Time Machine, but for some reason you rise into the air. After that, it's pretty generic, and these 4 orbs mark the beginning of RobTop's part. If you fall here, there's a clearly edited version of the first coin structure, which you'd normally be on top of. I like how you can barely see the coin, but it's still too easy to get, so it gets another D tier. Cycle Step uses an interesting remix by Sinfang, who they credited as Yinfang. It does kind of feel like Cycles, but once again, a lot of its charm has been lost. If you fall over here, you land in some remnants of the old level, but it doesn't lead anywhere. They kept the little orb chamber, which is nice, but now it's floating in the sky, and after that, the level quickly returns to normal. Finally, X Adventures uses a remix by Serial, and for the most of it, this one feels the exact same, just with a less unique first cube. The ball is kind of funny though, because you had one job. Yeah, they left out a portal, making this part impossible, but it is normal after that. And there you have it, Geometry Light Old version. Why does this exist? It makes me feel violently uncomfortable, so thanks for that. It's a good thing I can still play normal Geometry Light on the homepage, right? Uh-oh. You see, when they released the old version, the old was referring to the fact that this is Geometry Light now. So really, they were doing us a favor by releasing this version, because I do not want to stare at that. Now, if you were paying really close attention, you might have noticed that this version of the game has a different menu compared to the one I showed earlier. And that's because this one has the new levels too, complete with their names and music. Interestingly enough, this one fixed a bunch of gameplay issues from old version, even though they were released at the same time. X-Step had its missing portal re-added, albeit upside down. The extra gameplay underneath Cycles was cleared out, and another orb was added to base after base so you could get the first coin. And now I can properly say that it sucks, F tier. Alongside these changes, GD.io itself also went through a few tweaks at the time. For example, they changed their logo from this to this. In the corner of the site, they added a big box linking to GD old version. They changed the tab name from Geometry Dash to Geometry Light Dash the Rhythm. The game description was updated, which they do a lot, and finally, the disclaimer directly under the game was removed. It's almost like they were becoming increasingly paranoid about copyright or something. It's almost like GeometryDash.io got taken off of Google search due to a DMCA takedown from RobTop, one that was issued just a few days before they made all of these changes. But they got around the takedown by changing the homepage's link to geometrydash.io/light. It really should not be that easy, but apparently it is. Still, it was alarmingly clear that this website was now in panic mode, so much that they even paused adding new Scratch games for a little when it was usually one every day or two. They cooked way too hard with Geometry Light, and now we're stuck with ugh. So after that, they were chilling for a little while. Unsurprisingly, the game also updated on geometrylight.io because that's where the games are actually being hosted. Also, all the spin-offs like Meltdown, Sub-Zero, Spooky, and so on were completely unchanged. Eventually, about a month passed since this weird reskin was deployed, and that's when they made their next move, with a new game replacing this one, called Geometry Light. Yup, they did it again. To their credit, this is a much better reskin than the previous one. The textures are a lot more polished, and it looks a lot more Geometry Dash-like, which maybe they were trying to avoid at first. The levels themselves are the same edited versions of Stereo Dash through X Adventures, and thankfully the difficulty faces actually make sense now. I'll never forget you, Maurice. But what's new to this reskin is the fact that they changed a lot more of the in-game textures. The most obvious difference is probably the background and ground, but look closer and you'll see that all the blocks are just slightly different now. The default block uses a much uglier gray gradient that stays visible even when the background is black, and the other blocks just look kind of blurry. Also, your icon is this guy now. He's basically the face of Geometry Light as far as I'm concerned. You've also got this cool airplane ship and a pretty straightforward ball. As usual, you can't change your icon, and the ones behind the menu have just been taken out entirely. Interestingly enough, they also updated Sub-Zero to use this reskin, but every other spin-off was untouched. And even still, the unskinned version of Sub-Zero is still available on some websites, meaning they're still hosting both. In order for both versions to coexist, they have to be hosting both of them, but more on that later. There's really nothing interesting to share about Sub-Zero. All the levels and songs are unmodified, so really it's just new textures. We've got a few new goofy backgrounds for the levels, as well as a brand new icon set. Here's the cube, the ship, ball, robot, wave, and the spider. Finally, in late April, they updated Geometry Dash Old version, or rather downgraded it back to the original Geometry Light. The original textures, songs, and levels. It really reminds me of a simpler time, when the Geometry Light lore looked like this, and not this. But that is where Geometry Light stands today. No more tricks, I promise. As of writing this video, if you check out Geometry Light, these are the games that you were in Egg. This game came out 4 months before the original Spooky Dash did, and Spooky Dash is technically a reskin of this one. But the levels are completely different, and this time there's 3 of them. Once again, they're all 1.0 styled and actually really good. Like with Spooky, this game was sitting on geometry-dash.io for a long time, and it seems like at some point, whoever made Geometry Light realized that it's a prime target to steal from. Likely because it's not a real Geometry Dash game, so there wouldn't be any copyright issues. It also perfectly lined up with Easter, which continued the trend of them stealing scratch projects for certain holidays. And that brings us to their version of Egg Dash, which you'll immediately notice uses the exact same reskin as Geometry Light, unlike the scratch-themed one that was made for Spooky and Xmas Dash. But similar to those games, it only had one level, Shell Shock, which was also the name of the real Egg Dash's first level. Now, here's what the level looks like in the original game. And here's what their stolen version looks like. Wait, this is not the same level. The gameplay is completely different. The song is Heartbeat by Coldbreaks, credited by the way, and there's little decorations like flowers, these flags, and even... Yeah, you can't make this up. They used Easter Island heads as a decoration for their Easter game. And honestly, I respect it. But what shocked me the most is how good this level is. This is some of the most fun 1.0 styled gameplay I've played in a long time, and it even makes me a little sad to think that you never see levels like this in actual Geometry Dash anymore. The gameplay doesn't exactly do anything memorable, but it's still really enjoyable in the moment. There's 0 unfair jumps, and I'd put it at around the same difficulty as Back on Track. It also properly syncs with background changes and jumps that really complement the music. If you're wondering about the coins, this game doesn't have any, because it has cupcakes. The first one is in a wall in the ship part, and it kind of plays out like that one in Base After Base. The second one requires you to fly up in this ship section, and for the last one, you just need to hit this orb to reach an upper area that recovers with a pretty blind jump. They're all like D tiers, but they still have lots of charm. Oh, and one last thing. This is an XL level spanning the entire song, which is 2 minutes and 40 seconds. There aren't any major choke points aside from this unnerved triple spike about halfway in, but still, to make things less frustrating, they added an interesting new checkpoint system. Throughout the level, there's a ton of invisible checkpoints, and when you die, you can watch an ad to respawn at one. And yes, using these still counts as a legitimate completion. But is it really legitimate in your heart? So when I saw this level for the first time, there was one huge thought on my mind. This is a fantastic level. Who did they steal it from? It is way too good of a level to come from the same people who gave us Xmas Dash, so I looked everywhere, Geometry Dash, Scratch, but this level, a 3-minute 1.0 RobTop styled layout of Heartbeat, simply did not exist. They made it. And that right there was my breaking point. It was exactly when I realized that I wanted to investigate every last secret Geometry Light was holding. Who are these people? How are they making these games? And why? But where would I even start? These are Unity games. It's not like I could just open up the game files. Unity encrypts all that stuff really well, and even better when it's a web game. There was really nothing I could do. Just kidding, here it is decompiled and open in the Unity editor. Obviously I don't have access to any of the game's code, but I do have all the assets as well as the actual levels. And what shocked me more than anything is that these levels use actual Geometry Dash triggers. They've got color triggers with all the settings like copy color and blending. Also, for some reason this ship part, and nowhere else in the game, uses pulse triggers. Why would they go through the effort of implementing that just for a tiny section of the level? The rest of the level has pulses, but they do it with background triggers. Maybe the level was made by multiple people? Also look, here's all the invisible checkpoints in the level. Overall, the whole Unity scene is laid out in a way that looks a lot like this was ported over from some other program. You could tell they definitely didn't build the level right from Unity, but there's no saying for sure if it was built in Geometry Dash, especially when you factor in these decorations. Anyways, my first order of business was to write some code that takes every object in this level and prints its texture and coordinates to a file. Then I took each texture and mapped it to an object in Geometry Dash. For example, this block is named 2square01, and I mapped it to the default block, which is object ID 1. A little more coding later, and there you have it, a perfect port of Shellshock in real Geometry Dash. This isn't a recreation, this is one-to-one. I didn't place any of these blocks in the editor. It is worth noting that I replaced the Moai statues with pulsing rods, because how would I even go at making this in Geometry Dash? Anyways, here's the ID if you want to play it. It would be kind of funny if it got raided, but I'll leave that decision to some rogue mod. Also, what's great about having this code is that now I could do the exact same thing for Spooky Dash and Xmas Dash. I debated porting all of the modified RobTop levels, but it felt kind of boring compared to the fully original one, so I passed. At this point, I sort of just became mad with power, because then I started using this code to port over other games as well. If you know my Geometry Dash copies series, you might remember this one game that kept showing up. Sometimes it's Mario themed, sometimes it's Rabbit themed, but it's always the same 4 levels. This one was made in a different engine, and the level data was a lot more complicated than Unity, but after making a program to render the levels in my browser, I somehow got it working. Never underestimate the power of a hyper-fixated programmer. Anyways, you can play all these levels on the Rob's Basement account. I've been continuing to port levels from other rip-off games like Preamble from GeoJump, so feel free to check it out and look at the level descriptions for further context. Right now I'm pretty close to porting over that Bloodbath recreation, but I've been running into some weird issues, so it's on the back burner for now. So anyways, now that I had this game decompiled, I could finally dig deeper and uncover all the secrets that Geometry Light was holding. Let me just get the real Egg Dash open as a reference and... wait. Why is it called Egg Zone now? No, don't do this to me. Yeah, so a few weeks later, they added 2 more levels and renamed Shellshock to Egg Zone. And yes, the game did have a coming soon screen, but as a Geometry Dash player, I never thought I'd see the day where it wasn't a lie. The 2 new levels are called Yoki Joys and Howl Haven, and both claim to be easy 1-star, just like the first one. I also have no idea what those names are supposed to mean. Real Egg Dash used puns like Shellshock, Egg Static, and Cracked Up. What the hell is Howl Haven? And what's the deal with Yoki Joys? And why is Shellshock called Egg Zone now? So anyways, level 2 is also really solid, just like the first one. It's the exact same style of gameplay and decoration, but I'd put this one at around Jumper's difficulty since it introduces gravity changes for both the cube, or egg, and the ship. The song for this one is a remix of Pneumatic Tokyo by Envy made by Hallett. The song isn't credited, but when Hallett found out about this, they were kind of honored to have their song used, which is a really respectable attitude to have. At least it's not stuck in a game like Xmas Dash. One of the more interesting things I noticed about this level is that the checkpoints are visible now, unlike in level 1, where they're still hidden even after the update. Like I said, the level plays really well, and I would even say that's a little more interesting than the first one. However, it's a lot shorter, clocking in at 1:45, which is still longer than any RobTop level so far. The final quarter of the level has some really heavy impossible game / base after base energy, and it's probably the weakest part in my opinion. But otherwise, it's good. At least until we get the coins involved. First coin, fly through this pillar while upside down. It's like a fairer version of Jumper's coin. I'll take it. B-, maybe? Second coin, literally impossible to miss. And the third coin, literally impossible to miss. They probably didn't know where to put these 2 coins, but at the very least, couldn't you have taken 30 seconds out of your day to at least pretend you tried? This is embarrassing. Level 3 immediately kicks off with a bunch of triple spikes, which gives it some pretty heavy Time Machine vibes. The song for this one is Distorted Sakura by Ectobot, which was heavily inspired by Shinto by Envy. I don't know why they have a sudden obsession for Envy remixes, but they go pretty hard, so who am I to complain? This level probably has the least to say about it. The gameplay is just harder, and many of the jumps are much more tight. It doesn't feel nearly as tested as the others, and has quite a few areas where early jumps or orb hits will unfairly kill you. This level's also about 1:45, and for some reason it ends by suddenly switching to X-Step's visual style. and then it spells out egg pop with blocks, which I have no idea what that means. So yeah, I ported these levels over to Geometry Dash as well, and they play exactly the same, but I think the yellow orb physics are slightly different because there's this one orb in Howlhaven you have to delay a lot more. I decided to keep the checkpoints invisible, but they're in the editor if you really care. I highly doubt that these levels are stolen, but there's clearly a lot of RobTop influence, like Jumper in this part and Time Machine over here. My theory is that they were made by multiple people. This is the only spot in the game that uses pulse triggers, level 2 uses 2 red pads at the start, then never again, level 1 has a single gravity change that seems to stitch 2 parts together, and there's many spots where the style of the level takes a complete 180. There's probably more details I'm missing, but I'll leave it for someone else to look further into. Now here's the funny part. When I was porting over these levels, I found a 4th unused level called Cracked Up, and it was completely finished. And this was a crazy find, because the level is exactly the same as Yoki Joy's, just extended to span the entire 4-minute song. We're talking a full XXL Egg Dash level, and it is hard. Obviously the first half is exactly the same, but once you reach the new gameplay, it quickly jumps up to like map pack difficulty. It's still surprisingly sight readable, but pretty much every death past this point is going to be due to some kind of bug. Jump too early, you're screwed. Jump too late, you're screwed. Hit an orb wrong, you're mega screwed. It doesn't look that hard on video, but trust me, there's a lot of spots with really unforgiving timings. Case in point. Just a reminder that this level is 4 minutes long. I did eventually beat this level after like 20-90% deaths and many more rage quits, and I'd definitely say this is a demon, but like a long nerve control one. And if you don't believe me, here's the ID, go ahead and try it, or give it to someone you hate. When I realized that this was an extension of level 2, it made me wonder if that level had such lazy coins because it was after they cut it down. And sure enough, the 2 free coins were relocated, but they still weren't great. Coin 2 is basically free, and coin 3 is literally free, so clearly they've learned nothing. Anyways, if you want to see all 4 of the Egg Dash levels in their entirety, I've uploaded a showcase to my second channel, and the link will be in the description. Alright, welcome to the spicy part of the video, because now that you're familiar with all the Geometry Light games, it's time to look inside and see all the things they don't want you to see, and trust me, there was a lot. Let's start off with Egg Dash, where despite playing as an egg, the game has every single 2.1 icon in the game files. This actually applies to every Geometry Light game, but they only seem to get used for the menu. These are the only 2 icons actually used in Egg Dash, and there's another unused set to go along with it. The game has 9 different backgrounds, 4 of which are brand new, and the other 5 come right from GD. This is the only one that actually gets used. But weirdly enough, the backgrounds folder also contains an image called screenshot1.png, which looks like this. It's a cropped image of the actual GD editor, but it was taken in 2.1 based on the lack of the warp tool. And the reason I find it interesting is because this is from the level Viking Arena by RobTop, but all the monsters on this wall have been removed. You can see that I'm at the exact spot they took the screenshot. But above all else, it shows that they know how to open a RobTop level in the editor, even if it means just finding a copyable version. But if you look up Viking Arena copy in GD, virtually every single result is this fan-made recreation that's straight up wrong. And if most GD players don't notice that, I can guarantee that they wouldn't either. So either they somehow realized it was wrong and looked for an actual copy, or they just took it from the game files. But it takes some pretty deep knowledge to know how to port those into your saved levels. Either way, it's really suspicious. Heading over to the first version of regular Geometry Light, there's a few more screenshots lying around, like a really poorly photoshopped mock-up of their settings menu. There's also a shot of them getting 3% on Stereo Madness, and another of them beating it in practice mode after 85 attempts. And it makes me wonder if they're actually qualified to be remaking this game. Alongside those screenshots, we have the textures for every single object up to 2.1, and like icons, this is also the case with most Geometry Light games. This folder is an interesting one because all of the icon kit buttons here use the exact same file names as the ones on my online icon kit website. And while this could be a coincidence, the fact that they also grabbed the site's shuffle button says otherwise. Wait, does that make me part of the problem? But most damning of all is this folder called UI Sun Lamb, with a whole lot of unique textures that just so happen to perfectly match that older Geometry Dash clone, which I called a prototype. So I think this pretty much confirms that they're connected. But what about the folder name? Well, Sun Lam seems to be a Vietnamese name. It's not enough info to track down a specific person, but it could hint at where these games are being made. Finally, and most importantly, the levels aren't just recreations of RobTop levels, they're direct rips. Every object and every trigger is in the exact same place, And this also extends over to Geometry World, including the move triggers, as well as Geometry Meltdown, though there's a couple of details missing. I kind of like how World's move trigger code had no easing, but Meltdown's did, because it showed that they implemented whatever they needed as they went on. The game files for the reskins are especially interesting to me because they have a lot of unreleased UI images. For example, that first reskin they made, we can see a new icon and background that never made the cut. We can also see what the stats menu would have looked like, and even the icon kit. Though these are most likely concept images and not screenshots from the actual game. Also, that shop sign isn't for decoration, there's a shop mock-up too, and I can only imagine what they were smoking when they approved this. Surely enough, the newer reskin has even more screenshots. Here we can see an unused version of the level select, which later became this. You'll also notice Stereo Madness has its normal name, and that they got 52% in Practice Move. They also cleaned up the shop design a little bit, and added a dollar store version of my icon. But there's actually two more unused icons in the files. One is this guy, and the other is both terrifying and extremely based. On top of that, here's 5 backgrounds they made, and a collection of difficulty faces, the last of which never made the cut. Sadly, the previous reskin didn't even bother with one. Finally, we have Geometry Sub-Zero, where the levels were built in a completely different way. The triggers are squares now, and nothing matches up with real Geometry Dash at all. So it looks a lot like these ones were made by hand. Like the others, this game also had a few screenshots left in. And by a few, I mean 164. The vast majority of them are just low-quality YouTube screenshots, which they probably referenced when building the levels. For Press Start, they were watching every Geometry Dash level with coins, but switched over to Nexus's Sub-Zero video halfway through. Then for Knock'em, there's a single screenshot of Guitar Showcase, but not even 1% in, they switched to Nexus. There's no screenshots for Power Trip, but the randomized messages that appear in Nexus's video are the exact ones they used in their version of the level, and I'm sure it's not a coincidence. This leaves us with 7 remaining screenshots, which look like they're from the main game, but something is clearly off. The menu says Geometry Dash Full, and the corner holds 2 GitHub links. The level select says Stereo Madness Full, as well as Knock'em Full, and this screen has at least 30 levels. Attempts are called tries, and the checkpoints are blue again. At first I thought this was some ultimate Geometry Light game they were trying to make, but the real giveaway was this screenshot where the attempt count isn't perfectly centered. You see, you can easily change Geometry Dash's text by opening the exe in a hex editor, or anything really, and just searching for the messages. But since these are bytes of a carefully compiled game, you can only change letters because adding or removing them would shift the wrong data into every address of the game. And here, it looks a lot like they changed the string attempt blank to try blank followed by 4 spaces, so it's the same length. You know, the spaces that would go right here. Long story short, this is clearly some crudely edited version of real Geometry Dash. But how could I get my hands on it? It was literally just sitting on GitHub and they definitely didn't make it. Yeah, so this is Geometry Dash Full, a weird edit of 2.1 that contains a full version of every main level. I'm not sure how they found this or why they even used it considering the Sub-Zero levels are just 2.1 recreations, but this might explain why their version of the game calls all the levels full. And yeah, you can see it's got the blue checkpoints and tries and everything. All of the edits in this game are hilarious. Like the editor button is removed, but all they did was make the texture invisible. There's also a bonus level called Relax Level 2, which is just nope. That about wraps up all the interesting stuff I found in the game files, but it turns out that the real juicy stuff was outside. Remember how I said that all these games are hosted on geometrylight.io and how other websites just hook up to it? That way they automatically update and don't need to host it themselves. Well, believe it or not, these games aren't actually hosted on geometrylight.io. They're hosted on geometrylight.github.io. GitHub is a website where you can publish and manage code, and github.io allows you to host a little website. So all I did was go to Geometry Light's GitHub account, and lo and behold, a master repository of all their games. Unfortunately, they've already been compiled, so you can't see any code. They're basically just using this as a free host for their games. Now, I fully understand that by drawing attention to this repository, they're probably going to take it down shortly after this video releases, but really, it was a matter of time anyways. On the bright side, you know what's cool about GitHub? You can easily see a log of every change they've ever made, allowing me to monitor whenever they release a new version. And you know what's even cooler? You can view the full history and download every old or changed file. So what do you do when you have this massive collection of Geometry Light games with over 100 updates that you could just download? Obviously, you go through all of them, downloading every version of every game they've ever uploaded here. So if you're wondering how I was showing all those old versions over the course of this video, well, it's because I spent the afternoon making an archive of the 80 plus versions I could get my hands on. It's probably not something I'm going to release, mainly because it's super hacked together. If you're wondering why there's 5 versions of Light, they represent the different reskins as well as if they use the new levels or not. Weirdly enough, there were 6 updates for GeoJump, which was that older game, meaning that they were still maintaining it to some degree. But all they really did was rearrange the menu and add a More Games button. Also, the other Unity versions like Breeze seem to rely on some extra code because the icon kit shows up like this, and the play button... yeah, that's not right. One last thing to note is that these games try really hard to prevent you from just downloading and playing them. That way, competitors can't steal and profit off them. If the game detects that you're on an unauthorized website, it immediately redirects you to Geometry Light. But I think they forgot that you can bypass this with one line of code, the one that makes the "Are you sure you want to leave this site" pop-up appear. Just press no and you're good. They did add a better security measure in newer versions, but we'll get to it later. So by now, I already had pages and pages of notes on Geometry Light. This game was consuming my life, and I would lie awake at night wondering where I could find more answers. And it felt like every time I tried to leave it behind, that's when I would find my next big clue. It was quite literally dragging me back. But surely it doesn't go deeper, right? Hey, so did you know that the loading screen for every Geometry Light game says onegames.io? In the actual game, it links to geometrylight.io, but that game exclusively holds Geometry Light stuff, and OneGames has a bit of everything. It's just your average free games website advertised as the best one with no interruptions or microtransactions, probably because the product is you. Also, if you remember from before, Xmas-Dash's Free Games Online website also redirects to here. Speaking of Xmas-Dash, when they added it to the GitHub, they also added a game called Santa Run, which is still in the repository. It's just a weird Christmas Subway Surfers ripoff that has nothing to do with Geometry Dash. And would you look at that, there it is on OneGames, right next to Blue Mushroom Cat Run, which is the same game reskinned to... I don't even want to say it. Overall, this is really weird, because geometry-dash.io is connected to Geometry Light, but now Geometry Light is connected to OneGames. So are all these websites by the same people? I decided to check out the other games they offer, and fortunately they made it pretty easy to tell which ones are made by them and which ones are just random hosted games. For example, one game they made is Stick Run, and look at those moves. This is a completely original game concept that's never been seen before. Here's another game called Gorilla Adventure. In this game you control a gorilla that has to get over... Oh, I see where this is going. What about FNF Music 3D?
1, 2, 3, go!
Okay, that's enough research for today. As you'd probably expect, the rest of their games just continue this pattern of being garbage. But I did notice that a lot of them start with a play button like this, and it usually means it's hosted on a different website. And sure enough, inspecting the page shows that it's from html5gamedistribution.com, which is a huge collection of web games that they probably uploaded these to. A little bit of searching later, and I found all of their games under the name GM Media. Well, all the ones they uploaded here. Notably GeoJump, Eggdash, Xmas-Dash, and obviously Gorilla Adventure. I knew I was onto something because back when I loaded the games up in Unity, the company name was always set to GM Soft. So Geometry Light, OneGames, GM Media. Googling GM Media gives you nothing valuable, so I tried GM Media Geometry Dash and it led me to a LinkedIn page for Light Version Geometry Dash, who was a game developer at GM Media. This was huge. It meant that I found them. But little did I know, I just entered the labyrinth. The first thing I noticed about this profile is that the GM Media they listed was just some regular unrelated company. It also said that they were from Pennsylvania, and while they definitely had a Geometry Light banner, the profile photo was from the game Retro Bowl. The only other thing on the page was a link to another fake Geometry Dash website, as well as a Reddit and Twitch account. The website's homepage used to be Geometry Light, but as of right now it's been changed to the older game. Actually, quick update, it's the other Unity game now without the Geometry Light watermark. Aside from that, it's just another Geometry Dash site filled with stolen Scratch projects and other random stuff. So next I checked their Twitch. Their account was empty, but it did have a bio. Geometry Dash Life, where geometry meets rhythm. Feel the burn and meltdown, explore global beats and world, and brave icy hurdles in Sub-Zero. To my surprise, this one linked to even more websites, like Behance, which had the same bio, and 5 more websites. So naturally I checked out their DeviantArt, which linked me to their Vimeo, which linked me to whatever issue is, which linked me to Twitter, and finally we reached a dead end. But obviously this branches out so much further. How much further, you ask? You're probably wondering, what kind of crazy person would map out every account they've made and where they link to? And to that I say, after everything you've seen in this video, do you really think I'm sane? In total, they've made accounts on about 70 websites, and it's very obviously for search engine manipulation, because if Google sees a bunch of people talking about this website, it will show up higher in search. Ironically, it doesn't even show up, so maybe it got banned or something. If you want to check out the full graph I made, the link is in the description. Question is, did Geometry Light make this link farm, or was it just by whoever made this website? Well, maybe the links themselves would have some answers. First off, pretty much every account was made on January 23rd or 24th of this year. Nothing particularly eventful happened then, other than Geometry Sub-Zero getting Power Trip a few days earlier, and the first reskin being released a week later. On chess.com, yes, they have a chess account, it shows that they're from Vietnam, but they chose some address in Pennsylvania that doesn't even exist. Meanwhile, Vimeo claims that they're from, I hope I pronounced this right, Houston, Hoa Kỳ, which is the Vietnamese word for USA. And Freelancer.com straight up says they're from Vietnam, offering to work for $2 an hour. This all seems to suggest that, yeah, the whole Geometry Light operation comes from Vietnam. We also had that name in the game files, and the time zone even matches up with when they use GitHub. Also, if you're wondering about the Retro Bowl profile picture, that's because some of the accounts link to retrobowlonline.io, where you can play Retro Bowl online. This site also seems to have its own link farm, but I'm guessing they began switching some sites over to promote Geometry Dash instead. Speaking of that, you might have noticed that they often use the name Geometry Dash Light 68, and if you're wondering why they have the 68, well, it's because GeometryDash.ee's link farm stole all the good names. So at this point, I felt kind of stuck. Yes, I found something funny, but it doesn't help with the Geometry Light mystery at all, and it also doesn't help that ever since Egg Dash, nothing new has happened. In late April, they updated all the games to have some advertising and security tweaks, but that was about it. GeometryLight.io has been untouched for months, and still doesn't even show Egg Dash, and GeometryDash.io just went back to adding a couple of scratch games every day. So, was Geometry Light dead? Were they moving on to Guerrilla Adventure or something? We still never got the icon kit, or shop, or anything like that. Not even Clutterfunk for that matter. This whole time, one of my biggest questions was how you actually make a fake Geometry Dash site. Because they all look the same, work the same, and even run the same code behind the scenes. And the same goes for all of the non-Geometry Dash websites as well. It's pretty obvious that they're all built off the same template, but then where do you find it? Maybe it's on some market on the dark web? Either way, I could find no info on this. It seemed like nobody on the internet has even asked this question before. So does that make me the crazy one? Am I the only one who's ever questioned this? Surely I could find at least part of an answer. With nothing left to dig into, I decided to check out those recent updates they launched. To the average player, the only difference was the version number. But really, they switched to a newer Unity version and even exported the games in a slightly different way. And above all else, now when you play them on an unauthorized website, it just deletes the entire page and replaces it with a link to Geometry Light. And the way they do it is super simple. Inside the game's code is a line that checks the website you're currently on, and it sends that info over to onegames.io. Once it's sent over, OneGames will send back some settings based on the website you're on. Conveniently, I'd already gathered a master list of all the fake Geometry Dash websites I've come across, so I decided to write a program that sends each URL to OneGames